I just got done testing 10 air dusters. I've seen a lot of other videos where they go through, run a bunch of tests on air dusters. And originally I wanted to do a test just like that. But after doing that, I realized some flaws with some of these tests that I have seen online. So I came up with what I think is a much more reliable test. And in this video, I will go over all the tests I did, why some of the tests I think are not useful and why some of the tests are, and which tests you should actually pay attention to. I do want to point out that this is a sponsored video. A company called Hon&Guan sent me this air duster. And when I told them my idea to compare this with other air dusters that I have, they were on board, which I think is a good sign. It means they have confidence in their air dusters. So we will see how this compares to all the other air dusters. The first test I did was an RPM test, and you can see I only got through about 2 air dusters with this test. And the reason for that is I found out that my tachometer only goes up to about 100,000 RPMs. And with most of these air dusters, their fastest speed actually goes faster than 100,000 RPM. So I kind of quit when I found that out, but let me kind of tell you how I ran this test. In order to do this, I had to take the back off of the air dusters and I had to draw with permanent marker black so that there was kind of a sliver of metal that would reflect back to the tachometer. That's how it works to get the RPM. I wasn't confident that it was accurate, so I actually found out the formula for determining the RPM using hertz. So I used my phone to record the sound of the air duster, multiplied the hertz by 60, divided that by the number of blades on the fan. And you can see with the numbers in the same colors, this is the measured RPM with the tachometer. This is what I got with the hertz. Again, these are actually pretty consistent scores, but what I found with measuring the hertz is the faster it goes, the more fan noise you get that interferes with the pitch of the fan. So again, I wasn't able to get the high RPMs, but here's why none of that matters. Imagine this coin spinning at 1,000,000 RPM, let's say. It will probably generate some wind, but hardly any at all. There's no blades on this, nothing to really generate wind. Now imagine a ceiling fan spinning at about 1,000 RPM. You'll actually be able to feel that it will have much more force than this coin. That's why RPM doesn't matter. There are too many variables with the angle of the blades, how many blades are on the fan, how big the fan is. Now I realize for some of these air dusters, the fan size and shape is going to be fairly similar. So you might be able to make a case that RPM does matter. But when I did my testing with this Rechargeable one, for example, they have a claimed RPM of 300,000. Speed 1 was at about 50. Speed 2 was about 91. I don't think speed 3 got up to 300. I think this is more or less just a marketing gimmick to have a cool high number. Bottom line, don't really pay attention to RPM. Maybe it matters a little bit, but what is claimed on the Amazon page doesn't necessarily mean how powerful the fan is actually going to be. The next test I did was measured how loud each fan is in decibels. And most air dusters have 3 speeds, so I measured this at each 3 speeds and I measured it in conjunction with the wind pressure. So on this sheet, the low numbers are what you should be looking for. So you can see the top 3 on the low speed, the top 3 on the medium speed, and the top 3 on the highest speed. And all this means is how loud it is compared to the actual wind pressure. The only takeaways I have from this test is 1, this really doesn't matter all that much. They're all going to be kind of loud. You don't have a magical air duster that's really quiet, but also really powerful. And the other takeaway from this is efficiency actually goes up the more powerful the fan is. As the fan becomes more powerful, it does get louder, but not at the same increment as it does get powerful. Kind of interesting, but not really useful. Another test I did was testing the battery. Most of these air dusters have a listing on Amazon where they say how many milliamp hours it is. There was a couple that did not. And again, on this chart, we're looking for low numbers. That means it's the most efficient. And the top 3 in alphabetical order happen to be the ones most efficient with the battery. But again, I don't think this test really matters. And the reason for that is I cannot accurately test the milliamp hours without taking the battery out of every single air duster and testing it against the same load as I test with every single other air duster. The reality is with each of these air dusters, they have different motors. It allows different power to go through the motors. They have different top speeds. So how long the battery lasts is probably more indicative of how much power it is using. One trend you'll see on this this is the air dusters that are really powerful, they don't last very long. The air dusters that aren't very powerful, they do last long. So on the really powerful air dusters, simply turn down the speed if you want it to last longer. And the one test I have seen online that I think actually has some merit is blowing the air duster against a kitchen scale to see what the wind pressure is in grams. A few things of note with this test: there are some air dusters that actually list what they think the air pressure is in grams. For example, this Gaia lists at the top speed about 200 grams. I measured it out at 125, but that isn't to say their 200 grams isn't necessarily inaccurate. One of the problems with this test is you can move the air duster just like a millimeter above the scale, and obviously that's going to give you the biggest number possible. So to make up for this issue, I found that if you hold the air duster about 4, 5, or 6 inches away from the scale, there's a variance in distance where the pressure is the same because of how large the scale is. So I used a tripod to make sure the amount of air coming through was identical on every single air duster. It was also the same height on every single air duster. So hopefully I have a bit more consistency in this test than what you might see online or what might be claimed on the Amazon page. But one thing I noticed with this test is there are some air dusters where as soon as you turn it on, there's a big burst of air. It can give you a high number and then it instantly drops that air pressure. Again, this Gaia, it started out really strong, but then instantly dropped. The Hon&Guan got the second highest pressure, and this actually stayed really consistent throughout. The Wolfbox MF100, that also got a really high score, but it did gradually drop over time. So for that reason, I devised my own test. I call it the red ball test, where I shoot a ball in the air and have it stay up until the battery completely dies. But before I show you the results of that, let me go ahead and talk about one test that I did not include in this, and that is testing with a wind meter or an anemometer like this. I did start out testing the air dusters with this, but I quickly found an issue with this, and that is if you move the air duster just a little bit further away or closer, it makes a big difference in the speed. And if you change the angle slightly on the air duster, it does the same thing. In my mind, there's just too much variance to have reliable results. That's why I prefer the kitchen scale test. I have seen this test online with a different type of anemometer where it has like a small nozzle and people use that. I don't know if that's more accurate or not. Maybe it is, and maybe those results are good. But with this type of wind meter, I just felt it wasn't accurate enough to include in this video. So the last test I did was the red ball test. I made this thing out of wood. I put my phone on to use as a timer and to provide a place to clamp the air duster onto. I turned on the air duster at the fastest speed. Some of the air dusters I had to use Velcro to hold the button down, which is why you might see my head in the way for some of these tests. But the thing that this test does well is it shows how much power each air duster has compared to all of the other air dusters. You can see how high up the red ball is. Even though the ball does bounce around a bit, you can still kind of compare with the air dusters to see how powerful it is. But the real interesting thing here is over time, you can see as the red ball starts to go down slowly. For example, when this test first starts out, the Wolfbox seems to be clearly the winner. It is up above all the rest. As time goes on, the Hon&Guan seems to kind of take over that number one spot as the Wolfbox go down. So the rate of power kind of differs. And I'm not saying an air duster is better than one or the other if it has consistent power or if it has a strong burst at the beginning and then loses power. It all kind of just depends on what you want. But as you continue to watch this time lapse, you can see each of the air dusters as the ball drops and how long it lasts. And the most obvious correlation here is the most powerful air dusters tend to die sooner because they are using more power. And some of these air dusters have smaller batteries than others. So a lot of factors, but hopefully this test gives you a good idea of which air duster is the most powerful. So if we only looked at the kitchen scale test, we'd say this Gaia is the most powerful because it has that initial burst of power. But as you see in the red ball test, you can't even see the ball up there because it lasts so short that by the time you can see the red ball, it's already down below the other balls. You could also argue this Wolfbox is the most powerful because at the beginning of the test, the red ball seems to be up higher in the air than any of the others. And you could also argue that this Hon&Guan is the most powerful because after the Wolfbox drops down, this is still going at a very powerful rate. Really, it just kind of depends on what you're looking for, but I hope the red ball test gave you a good idea of what is what. Most air duster videos I've seen online kind of stop with the results and say one air duster is better than the other because it's the most powerful or it has the most RPMs. But after running through all these tests, I want to point out a few things that I noticed with some of these air dusters that I think are just as important, if not more important, to your decision as to what air duster you should get. One thing I noticed is most air dusters had about 3 or 4 levels. For example, with this air duster, you press the button, turns on, press it again, higher, press it again, higher, press it again, it turns off. But I came across a few air dusters that are unique. For example, this one, you can press and hold the button to turn it on, and then there's kind of this slider in the back. So if I want to turn it up more, I can do that, or if I want to turn it down, I can do that manually. This one is similar. It has a slider here that you can move up and down, and this one can do kind of the same thing. It has an up and down button, so you can do kind of like micro adjustments. And the advantage that I see with this, if you're soldering and you want to blow the smoke out, or if you're painting and you want to get the fumes away or help the paint to dry faster, you can use these air dusters and put it on a really low speed, so the battery is going to last a long time, but you're blowing fumes or smoke out of your face. So that's one really nice use case for air dusters with micro adjustments. But something like this, you couldn't do that because it only has 3 speeds, and the lowest speed is still kind of loud and powerful. One thing you should know if you want to do that is look for an air duster with a flat bottom, so you could put it on a table and you could just point it wherever you want. Most air dusters are flat on the bottom, but one like this, you can't really put it on a table or anything like that. So something to be aware of. Another thing to consider is with the nozzles. Most use cases for air dusters is going to be simply to blow the dust out of a keyboard or out of a computer or something like that, where a nozzle like this is going to be what you want. But maybe you want an air duster to detail your car, for example. You might have hard to reach spots, so you might want a nozzle like this that can go in tight spaces and blow dust out. Or maybe you have dust that's really old, it's kind of caked on, and blowing it at any speed won't get the dust off. But if you have a brush like this, you can kind of brush it off and then the air will blow it away. And all I'm trying to say is think of all the use cases you might want an air duster for, and make sure it has the appropriate nozzle, whether it's photography and you want to blow air out of the lens, or car detailing, hobbyists, blowing leaves out of your garage. Just make sure you have the appropriate nozzle. And that leads me to the last thing I want to talk about, which is what an air duster actually does. It moves dust from one place to another. That is all. It doesn't get rid of dust, it just blows it away. And for some cases, that can be totally fine. But in my opinion, it is much better to remove the dust. So that is why I suggest you look for an air duster with one of these attachments on it. This is a vacuum attachment. All air dusters have this capability because it sucks air in one end and blows it out the other. So all the manufacturer has to do is make something like this that you can put on the back. That's one of the reasons I really do like this Hon&Guan air duster, is it also has that vacuum attachment. So instead of just blowing out dust, you can suck it up as well. Go ahead and check out my spreadsheet if you want to see which air dusters I tested that actually have this vacuum attachment. This Hon&Guan air duster did end up being probably one of the most powerful air dusters, probably along with this Wolfbox. Both really great air dusters. Prices for air dusters change all the time, so I will have links in this video or on the spreadsheet so you can check them out, see which air duster is on sale, see which one has the price you want. Right now, this Hon&Guan air duster has a coupon that makes it one of the best deals you can get for an air duster. It's very powerful, has the vacuum, great price. I hope this video helped. Thanks for watching.